Now the next thing that I want to add into this game are enemies, and this is going to be in the shape of a bird that's going to fly across the screen. So the bird is this bird image that I've got here, and I've got a bigger version of it here that I can zoom in. You can see it's essentially just a bunch of individual still images. Now I'm going to extract each of these ones individually and then play them quickly to create an animation. So this file, bird.png, is stored with all the other assets so far within this assets folder. Now first of all, that means I need to load that image into the game. So we go down to where I've got my load images section, and just down here I will add another comment and start loading in the bird. Say bird sprite sheet, and it'll be bird underscore sheet underscore img is equal to, and I'll load in the exact same as before, pygame.image.load, then the location of the file, so it's within this assets folder here. So assets / bird.png.convert alpha. That's going to load the image in for me, but I need to convert it into a sprite sheet. So I've previously created an additional module with a class inside it called sprite sheet, and this kind of does the work and automates it for me. I'm not going to go through all this just now because I have a separate video that explains all this in a lot more detail, but I am going to be using this. So you need to make sure that you have this spritesheet.py file in the exact same folder as your main code. That way you can come up here and import that. I'll say, I'll say from sprite sheet, which is the name of the file, import the name of the class, which was sprite sheet with capital S's. So this one. And now that I've imported this, I will be able to use this image that I've just loaded and turn it into my sprite sheet. Say bird underscore sheet is equal to, call that class of sprite sheet and pass the image that I've just loaded, bird sheet img. So now I'm ready to actually start creating the enemy class, but I'm not going to do it within this main game code. I will keep it as a separate file of its own. So here I've created enemy.py. It's a blank file at the moment, but you need to make sure that you have the same setup and it's in the same folder as your main code. So first of all, within this code, I need to import my PyGame module. I'll say import PyGame. And then just like the rest of the classes, I'll set up in the same way. So class, enemy. Now this is going to be a sprite class from PyGame. Therefore I need to add in this little line within the brackets, and it's pygame.sprite.sprite. And I create my constructor. So my init method takes the arguments of self. Now I'll add all of these ones and I'll show how these are getting used later on. So then the screen width, the y coordinate, sprite sheet, which is the image I've just loaded, I'll be able to pass that in here, and then a scale, which will just allow me to easily scale the bird image up and down as I need it. Now the first line of this constructor is going to call the sprite sheet, or sorry, the sprite class constructor dot init. So this allows me to inherit the functionality of PyGame's sprite classes. And now I can start defining my variables. So remember, typically with these classes, the first thing that I do is load in the image. So I can say image is equal to, but now it's not an individual image, it's a sprite sheet. So that's going to be fed in here as an argument. I'll take sprite underscore sheet, and then I can start calling the methods from that class. So if I bring up that code again, this getImage method, which is what I'm going to call, allows me to extract an individual still image from that entire sheet. So the arguments that I need are the frame, the width and height, the scale that I want to use, and then the color, which is what's going to be used for transparency. So I'll feed them in order. The first one is going to be the frame. Well, I'm going to start at frame 0. The size is going to be 32 by 32, and that's just the size of that image. Then the scale, which is going to be fed in as this argument here. And then lastly, I will be using 0 for the color key. And that's going to return the first image from that animation. Now I need to make sure that I set a color key back for it. So set underscore color key, and I will put black. So this is going to make sure that I maintain my transparency for this image. Now with that done, I can assign that to a rectangle. I'll say, oh no, sorry, first I need to assign it to self.image. So self.image is equal to image, and that's annoying, self.rect is equal to self.image.get_rect to get a rectangle from it. With that done, I need to specify the X and Y coordinates for it. So the X coordinate of my rectangle is going to be 0. It's going to start off on the left-hand side of the screen. And the Y coordinate is going to be self.rect.y is equal to this Y argument, which actually needs to be in small case, or lowercase, sorry. Okay, so this is the bare bones of this enemy class. I'm going to save this file for now, and I will go back into my main code and actually see if it's all working first without any errors. Now, because this is a separate file, I need to make sure that I'm importing it here. I will say from enemy, which is the name of the file, import enemy with a capital E. So that's going to be accessing this file and importing this class. Now that I have access to this class, I can start creating instances of it and store them within a sprite group. Now I already have a section here above my game loop. So this is my game loop here, and up here I've got my comment for creating sprite groups. At the moment it's only my platform group, but now I can add a second one, which will be enemy underscore group, and then it'll be the exact same code, pygame.sprite.group with a capital G. Now that this is created, I'm able to add instances into this group. So let's start generating the enemies themselves. Now that's going to be happening within the game loop, just the same as the platforms. So here's where I'm generating the platforms, and I'm updating them by putting them into this platform group. So just underneath that, I will do the same thing for enemies. I'll say generate enemies, and the code is going to be very similar. I'm going to be looking at how many enemies there are at the moment. So I'll say if len of enemy group, and for now I only want one bird to be generated at a time. So if there are no birds at the moment, so if that enemy group is empty, then I can create a new one. I'll say enemy is equal to an instance of this enemy class, and then I just need to give all those arguments that I had within this code here. So it was my screen width. Well, I'm just feeding that same variable in here. So screen width. Then it was, I believe, the Y coordinate. I'll have them starting near the top of the game window. So I'll just say 100 pixels. So remember 0 is right at the top. So this will just be 100 pixels from the top of the screen. Then I need the sprite sheet that it's going to be using. And then lastly, the scale. Well, the sprite sheet I've loaded in, that is bird underscore sheet. And then the scale I will use is 1.5. And now that this is created, I need to make sure that I add it into my group. I'll say enemy group.add enemy. So as soon as this runs once, this enemy group has a file in it, or rather it has one item in it, and this condition won't be met again until that enemy runs off the end of the screen and then gets killed. So let's just run this and see if it works. Okay, so it executes fine, which means that there's no errors kicking in just yet, and the code and the files are all accessing each other fine. Of course, there are no birds appearing on the screen, but that's because although I've created an instance of it, I've not called the draw method. So I'm not telling PyGame to display it on the screen just yet. So we'll come back down here. Now I like to keep everything within its sections. So down here, I've got draw sprites. Right now I've got platform group and then jumpy. So in between them, I will draw my enemies. Say enemy underscore group dot draw onto the screen. Now, if we go back to this class, note that I haven't created a draw method, but as I've explained before, whenever you use this pygame.sprite.sprite, you essentially inherit the functionality from PyGame's sprite classes, and they automatically have an update and a draw method. So if I run this again, you can see there's a little bird appearing on the screen, and it's exactly where I specified it. It's over on x coordinate 0, so it's just on the left of the screen, and it's 100 pixels from the top. Now, of course, it's just sitting there stationary, doing absolutely nothing, and as I jump, it doesn't scroll with it, it just stays where it is. So there's some functionality still to add, but I can see that it's now working fine and it's there in the background. Now, the first thing I want to do is have the bird moving across the screen. I don't want to just appear there and stay stationary. So I want to move it across left and right, just as I have done with the platforms. So for this, I will need some additional variables within this init method. I'm going to keep all this down here as it is, and above is where I'm going to add in my variables. I'll say define variables. And if I want to move the bird across the screen, I need to define a direction for it, because it could be moving left or it could be moving right. I'll say self.direction. And actually, I'm going to randomize it. So I will import the random module at the top here, import random. Now we can say that self.direction could be random.choice, And then within here, I will just put in a list of either -1 or 1. So it's either moving in a negative direction from right to left, or in a positive direction from left to right. Now, to actually handle the movement and updating all of the parameters and the coordinates of this class, I need to add an update method. So down here, I will say define update. And for now, all I will put in here is self. I will come back and add more arguments as I build this up. So first of all, I want to move the enemy. So I'll comment to say move enemy. And I will alter the rectangle's X position by self.direction, and I'll multiply it by 2. So I could add a speed variable and I could randomize it just as I have done with the platforms, but I've chosen to just fix it at a speed of 2. So what this should do now is increase this X coordinate by 2, depending on which direction it's moving in. So save this and go back to the main game code, because remember, I'm not actually calling that update method anywhere just yet. So just up here where I'm generating the enemies, I am going to have a section where I will update enemies. And I will say enemy underscore group dot update. And it doesn't need any arguments just yet. So if I run this again, and there you go. So the bird, luckily enough, the direction was 1. So it's appeared here and it's moving across the screen. It was moving backwards, you may have noticed, but we'll come to that. But what if the bird had chosen a direction of -1? Well, then it would have just gone straight off the side of the screen because it started on the left. So actually what I need to do is, after I've defined the direction, I need to set the X coordinate, the starting X coordinate, based on this. So I will wrap this in an if statement. We'll say here, if self.direction is equal to 1, therefore it's moving left to right, then I will keep the rectangle's X position as 0. So it's going to start off on the left-hand side of the screen. But otherwise, if it's starting on the right-hand side of the screen, we keep that as it is, then self.rect.x needs to actually be on the other side. So it needs to be the right-hand side of the screen, which is my screen width. So now, regardless of where this bird is facing, it's going to be appearing on that relative or relevant side. So let's try this again and just see if, okay, it's worked out exactly the same. It's appeared on this side. Try this again. Okay, there we go. So that's worked this time. It's just a random factor, but this time it's appeared on that side because it's moving from right to left. Now the next thing that I want to build onto this is that when the bird goes off the edge of the screen, it just gets deleted, because I don't want it to just continue going on forever. And remember that within my game loop where I generate these birds, I check for how many are already in memory. So as soon as one is created, I need to make sure that it gets deleted when it goes off the edge so that I can then create another one. Otherwise I'll be limited to one enemy for the whole game. So that means that within my enemy class, I need to add a little bit more code to the update method. So this section here moves the enemy, and that's fine. And after it's moved, I'll add a comment to say check if gone off screen. And this check is, well, it's similar to what I've done previously. I say if self.rect.right, so if the right hand side of the rectangle has gone off the left hand side of the screen, meaning the bird is completely off, or self.rect.left has gone off the right hand side of the screen, so screen width, well, in that case, self.kill, and that's just going to delete that instance from the group. But note, this is going to throw an error because I'm calling a variable here, which within this code here doesn't exist. I need to pass it as an argument into this update method. So we'll add screen width here, and I will also need to add that, so save this file, and I also need to add that when I'm calling the update method here. So there's the first argument that I'm adding in, say screen width. So if I run this now, I'll get these birds coming across the screen, and when it goes off, I should get another one. Now for now, both of them seem to have appeared on this side. Okay, now I've got a bit of a switch and I'm getting another one. So as long as it's going to keep going, I'll just get these birds going off the edge of one side and then appearing from either this side or this side. They seem to all be coming from the right. The next thing that I kind of wanted to demonstrate is this. So although they're moving in different directions, the bird always faces to the left. So what I need to be doing is flipping that image depending on which way it's going. It's fine when it's going right to left, but when it's going left to right, it's facing the wrong way. So that's fairly straightforward to tackle, so let's do that next. What I will do is add an additional variable to my init method. So underneath my self.direction, I will say if self.direction is 1. So similar to what I've done down here actually, but I can't, I tried to nest them together, but I have to do them in separate sections of the code, and you'll see why shortly. So if self.direction is 1, then that means that the bird is moving left to right, but that image is backwards, so I need to flip it. Say self.flip is equal to true. But otherwise, it's already in the right orientation. So if it's moving right to left, it doesn't need to be flipped. So self.flip stays as false. Now that I have this image, let's add a little comment on top of this section actually to say load images from spreadsheet. And now that I have this, I can flip this image that I'm loading in. So before I generate, or before I assign it to my self.image variable, I can say image is equal to pygame.transform.flip, and the image I want to flip is the image itself, and then it takes two variables, so either my flipping in one direction or flipping in the other. So I will flip in the X direction, and I will not flip in the Y direction. If I save this now and just watch to see where they appear from, so I kind of need to wait until one comes in from this side now to show that it's worked, because these ones are not flipping and then that one is flipping. So now I fixed that, and the birds are always going to be facing the right way. So the next step to build this up then is to add in a way of scrolling this, because at the moment it's actually moving together with everything else with the game window. So it should be scrolling just like the platforms in the background, but it isn't. It's just staying always 100 pixels from the top of the screen, and the player pretty much can't reach it. So that's the next thing to add in. Now remember, everything, all the scrolling is controlled by one variable, which is the scroll variable. And what I've been doing with the platforms, for example, if I go back up to my platform class here, I have this update method, which takes scroll as an argument, and then I just adjust the rectangle's Y coordinate based on that scroll variable. So I can do the exact same thing for the enemy. I'll go into this update method, make sure that I add scroll as an argument. I will add it before my screen width. And now I've got this move enemy section where I'm already updating the X coordinate. So just to keep it all tidy, I'll do it just here as well. Self.rect.y is increased by scroll. So that's all that's needed here, but I need to make sure that I actually feed this argument in within the game code. Otherwise, the number of arguments won't match up. So this update method now has to say scroll and then screen width. Now if I run this again, there's the bird, but as I jump up, you can see it's now reacting properly. And because they always get generated 100 pixels from the top, as I keep jumping, they're always going to be coming in from the top. Okay, and there you go. Now obviously I don't want this bird to just be a static image the whole time. I do want to add an animation. That's the whole reason for that sprite sheet. And I'm going to get to that in a second, but one thing that I need to remember to do within the game code is when I go into the main game loop here, and I've got this section for the game over part, essentially, remember that when I press space, so when I die, it comes up with this fade effect and then it says press space to play again. When I press space here, it resets all of my variables. And I also took this opportunity to reset all of the platforms, the platform groups. I need to make sure that I'm also capturing the enemy group. So I add a little section above here that says reset enemies. And it will be the exact same thing, enemy_group.empty. So I just want to do this now, just so I don't forget to come back to it afterwards. Now, as soon as the game is over, I'll make sure that everything is fully cleared and we start from fresh. With that done, I can start working on the animation. Now most of that is going to be handled within this enemy class. So right now I've had this section here, but it's actually temporary. I've just used this to load in the initial image manually. But now I need to automate this and create an animation from it. So if I bring this image up again, it was bird.png, it's a whole bunch of individual stills. Now my method from this class allows me to get an individual image, and for now I've just put in the number 0 at the beginning, which just says load in this first still. What I need to do is expand it a little bit, add a way of storing them that then iterates through each of these, loads them out one by one, and then saves them into a list for me. And that's going to be my list of animations. So that's what we'll do just now. Now within this define variables section, right at the top, I will start off by creating everything that I need for the animation. First of all, it will be the list. I'll say self.animation underscore list, and I'll set this up as an empty list for now with these empty square brackets. Next, I will need an index of being able to track which stage of the animation I'm in. So each of these will have a number, and I will need to know which number of the animation I'm currently showing. I will have another variable, which will be self.frame underscore index. And I will start this off at 0, which means that the first frame is what's going to be shown. Then I also need to have this animation working on a timer. So I need to know what time this enemy class or the instance is first created at. As soon as it's created, the timer starts and the animation is then running based on that timer. I'll say self.update underscore time is equal to pygame.time.get underscore ticks. And for now, this is all I need. But now what I need to be doing is, rather than manually loading in this 0th image, I need to actually automate that, iterate through all of them, and save them within this animation list instead. So I'll come down here and I will first of all define a variable called animation steps, and I'll set this to 8. So what this variable is defining is how many still images I've got. And now I can iterate through that number. I can say for animation in range animation steps, iterate through each and every one of them. So indent this part, make a little bit of space here, and then just start loading in the images. But now what I'm going to change here is this position. So this is the frame, but because I'm going through each individual one, instead of being fixed at 0, I want that to be changing as this for loop iterates. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And it will extract every image from there in this picture size, so that all the rest of the parameters stay the same. But at the very end of it, I need to make sure that whatever image I've loaded, I save back within this list. I'll say self.animation underscore list dot append. And what I'm appending is this image that I've loaded. So by the end of this for loop, once it's completely finished, I will have a completely populated list that will have individual images for each stage of the animation. But now that means that this part here doesn't quite work anymore, because it doesn't want to load an individual image. It needs to know which stage of the animation I'm in and assign it for that. So let's add a little comment here to say select starting image and create a rectangle from it. So now rather than just opening up the image, I will be accessing that animation list instead. And what index am I going to be using from it? Well, I have a variable for that, which is my frame index. So here I'll put self.frame underscore index. So at the very beginning, this image is going to be assigned to the initial frame. So it's always going to start off in this condition. Now, before I go too much further, let's just test whether this is working. I'll go back into the main loop, the main code, sorry. Run that, and okay, everything seems to be fine. The bird is still there and moving across the screen. So I know I'm not getting any errors, so I know that the image is being loaded in correctly. So you see that it's still the same still image, but it's now accessing it from that list. Now I can handle the animation itself. And of course, because this is something that's going to be changing, it needs to be handled within the update method here. So above all this movement stuff, I will have another section and I'll add a comment to say update animation. So first of all, I need to define some kind of variable for controlling how quickly this animation runs. And this is going to be my animation underscore cooldown variable. I will set this to 50, which means 50 milliseconds. So it's going to run very quickly. And by playing around with this number, you'll be able to speed up or slow down the animation. Next, I'll say update image, depending on current action. Or rather, depending on current frame. So the code here is going to be exactly the same as what I've got up here. I'll put that in here. And I'm just saying, again, let's make sure that the image that I've got is taken from the animation list at the current frame index. So if this frame index has changed, then I need to update this image accordingly. Then I need to check how long has passed since I last displayed this image. If enough time has passed, then it means I need to move on to the next stage of the animation. So check if enough time has passed since the last update. So I've previously got this variable up here, my update time, which I've taken as pygame.time.getTicks. So now I need to take another timestamp. So I can say again, if pygame.time.get_ticks This is going to tell me what time it is right now. I can subtract the time when the instance was generated, so the update time, or rather whenever the last time this image was updated. And if that time difference is greater than the animation cooldown, so if enough time has passed, then I need to move on to the next frame. So I'll say self.frameIndex is increased by 1. But also I need to make sure that I reset this update time, because the image has just been updated. Well, that means that my update time is whatever the time is right now, pygame.time.getTicks. So that essentially resets the counter and starts it up again. So we can run this and should be able to see an initial animation. It doesn't work for very long though, and the reason for that might become obvious here. So what's happening is at each stage of the animation I'm increasing the frame by 1, but eventually I get to the point where I'm asking it to access a point in this list that doesn't exist. So this list has 8 individual stills in it, but this index just keeps increasing and increasing. So once it goes past that, it's going to try and get an image that's not there. What I need to do is make sure that when I go past or to the end of the animation, I can reset and restart the animation back at the beginning. I'll add another comment here then to say if the animation has run out, then reset back to the start. And to do that, I just look at what the current frame index is. So if self.frameIndex, remember it has just been increased just up here. So if that increased index is greater than or equal to the number of instances that I've got within this animation list, well, in that case, I need to make sure that I restart, because otherwise I'm going to get an error. So frame index is 0 and the animation begins from the start. Let's try that again. And this time you can see it's a continuous animation. So that bird is flapping across the screen, goes off the edge, and a new one is generated in its place. And what I was saying about this variable here and how you can control the speed. So if I set this to 500, you'll be able to see now the animation is far slower. So each of the stills is displayed for a half a second rather than the speed that it was before. So let's set this back to 50. And that's pretty much it. So the enemy is now set up and working exactly how I want it. So at the moment I'm able to jump up and I can actually reach these enemies, but there's no collision set up yet, so nothing really happens when I interact with them. One thing though is that the whole point of this was to make the game more difficult as it goes on. So the first difficulty was the moving platforms, and then the second difficulty is going to be these birds. So I don't actually want them to be coming in as soon as the game starts. I just had them in here just so I could demonstrate and build it up from scratch. But what I really want to do is alter this enemy generation, and just as I did with the platforms, I want to make sure that it only happens, where did I do this? Here, only happens when the score is above a certain value. So the platforms start to change and become moving platforms when I get past 500, while with the enemies, I'll add an extra line here and say, and score is greater than 1500. So now the enemies aren't going to appear straight away. I'd have to climb up quite a bit, get past the initial moving platforms, and only then will I start to see these birds coming across the screen. I'm not even sure if I'll be able to, okay, I just made it before I fell off, but you could see a bird appeared in the top right there. So that's how we add enemies into the game. So I hope you found that useful, and thanks for watching.